Morning, everybody. Need to put my eyes on. All right, it's been a couple days since we've been up here. We had a kind of a sick day or a leave of absence, and we had Brother Titus was up here the other day. So it's good to see y'all. Thank you, Seth, for filling in for me the other day or a couple weeks ago. Appreciate it. And we are going to we're wrapping up lesson 7. We've been talking about the text we're going to read has been an admonition of Jacob. One of the things, I can't remember where I heard this, I can't remember where I heard it. I heard it from somebody. Maybe somebody else heard it and they can tell me where I heard it. But you have to follow before you lead. That's what I heard. And you think about our culture. We've been talking about culture. And of course, you think of young adults nowadays, and sometimes young adults can think they know it all, right? I think about, I suppose I was probably in that position at one time a little bit. You don't really want to take heed to good advice or seek wise counsel. You kind of think you got it all figured out. But Joshua, he was in the footsteps of Moses, and then he'd been in a spot where he had to hear, to be strong, be courageous. And we'll read the text verse here, Joshua 23. It's in Joshua 23, verses 2 through 3. Mr. B, we're going to do like we did the other time a couple weeks ago. You read the verses 2 and 3, and then Janet, if you could please read Joshua 23, 6 through 11.
And Joshua called for all Israel, and for their elders, and for their heads, and for their judges, and for their officers, and said unto them, I am old and stricken in age. Ye have seen all that the Lord your God hath done unto all these nations because of you. For the Lord your God is he that hath fought for you.
Be ye therefore very courageous to keep and to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, that ye turn not aside therefrom to the right hand or to the left, that ye come not among these nations, these that remain among you, neither make mention of the name of their gods, nor cause to swear by them, neither serve them, nor bow yourselves unto them. But cleave unto the Lord your God, as ye have done unto this day. For the Lord hath driven out from before you great nations and strong. But as for you, no man hath been able to stand before you unto this day. One man of you shall chase 1,000, for the Lord your God, he it is that fighteth for you, as he hath promised you. Take good heed therefore unto yourselves, that you love the Lord your God.
All right. So we thank you for reading that for us. And again, we see here Joshua is saying to be courageous. We see here he's towards the end of his life, and he says, be therefore not just courageous, but he says be very courageous. And courageous, to be courageous in the Strong's has the thought of what? Being. I like to watch Abe because we're up here singing and he goes like this. Be strong, right? And when we're singing that one song, he's to be strong, to be to withstand. And we think about our world today, culture today. The world today is trying to tear things of God down. Culture today is everything but what we ought to be for godly living. And also it says, but to cleave unto the Lord. He's admonishing them to be strong and to cleave unto the Lord your God. And to cleave is to hold fast, to hold on to. He has here the thought in his last words, or in his, as he's given an admonition to the people. What is an admonition? Anybody know what is an admonition? I'm a word guy. If we're going to talk about admonition, we better know what it is. What is an admonition?
Is that like a correction?
Instructions?
It's like a cautionary warning. It's advice. It's counsel. Yeah. So I mean, it could be but he has here the thought. He's telling the people that be courageous because God has brought you this far, and that He'll continue to fight for you. He'll continue to lead you and guide you. He was encouraging them to keep God's law and to reject the gods of this world. And we think about the culture, and we think about what this world tries to offer, and what Satan tries to offer. And in his final admonition, what he's telling people to do too is to what? To love the Lord your God. He's encouraging them to love God. At one point, Joshua maybe wasn't so courageous, but after time, you think in wisdom and growing up and seeing the things, the way the Lord's provided and the way the Lord worked in their lives, he was on the elder side, encouraging the youngers to stay strong, to be courageous, to continue to love God, to continue to serve Him. And he was looking back at his life, and he was seeing where he probably made some mistakes, but he was looking back to where he was comfortable, and he had a delight that he trusted in the Lord, he followed the Lord. And he had fallen in love with God, his great God. That was his leader, his guide, and his refuge. And he was now looking back at the end of his life saying, he was encouraging the next generation to do the same, to be strong, to be courageous. We had the story about Surf's Up dude with the Dale Webster, and he had 28 years that he gave his life to surfing. And we know that he surrendered to the living sacrifice of the waves, right? We ought to surrender our lives to a living God. Dale Webster, he gave his life to surfing, and he changed a surfing world record. But Joshua gave his life, and he changed world history. He changed history of the people, the generations to follow him. Those that would look up to him, those that would take his advice, that would take heed to his counsel, that would look upon Joshua's life example. And he changed world history. We had talked about, I was talking to Sister Hall, and she had said that her house had got broken into, and someone had stolen all her jewelry. And in that jewelry that was stolen was a wedding ring that she got from her mom. And it was just a ring to whoever stole it. Whoever stole it took it to the pawn shop probably and maybe got $50 for it. Who knows what they got for it. But when we think about the gift of the giver that was given to her from her mom, it meant a lot. It had not so much in monetary value, but it meant dear to her. And we think about the gift that God gives us. When God works in our lives, think about when we trust in Him, look to Him, and we seek Him, and He gives us eternal life. We think about that life and what a blessed gift that is from God. We think about, it has here the thought that you must give your life to some God. It could be the God of self, the God, as Dale Webster had, the God of surfing. Who will you give your life to? We ought to desire to give our life to the God of salvation. We have here text. Looks like at Romans 12:1. What is Romans 12:1? 1 and 2 actually. Romans. I don't know, Aunt Rose, would you like to read that for us? Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Is that okay? Yeah.
I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God.
All right, we see here, here's your, we've been talking about culture and the culture of this world, and we think about here, be not conformed to this world, or What is it to be conformed? What is it to be conformed? We ought to conform ourselves to something, but it certainly ought to not be this world or this culture. What is it to conform?
To be molded.
To be molded like, to be formed, has the thought of to be fashioned like, or a pattern. So yeah, to be molded like. We ought not be conformed to the culture of this world, but transformed. What is it to transform? Actually, I gotta be honest, I didn't look this one up, but I can't. To be changed, be transformed, be changed. By the renewing of your mind, that may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And that's what Joshua was doing. He was encouraging people to be courageous, to be strong, to cling on to. We have here the thought in the Webster Dictionary as the thought to conform oneself, one's mind, and character to some pattern. And how do you desire to have yourself seen or your pattern? After this world, after the cultures of this world, the things of this world, or after our Creator? We ought to emulate our Lord and Savior. So here we have the thought in conclusion. We have the thought of, we talked about folly. So we have here the thought of, we ought to look at folly. We ought to get tired of it. We ought to put it aside, and we ought to think of the rewards that await us in eternity. We think about life, and some people think about life as being a time to live just right now, live for the moment, right? But we're not only living for the moment. We ought to live for the moment. We ought to live for the moment to be a living example to our Heavenly Father. But we ought to be living for the future, towards eternity, and the things that await us. And we ought to, as God's people, and we ought to have an eagerness to embrace what God has for us. We ought to be eager for the future that God has for our lives. And then we ought to certainly have a love and desire for our Creator, the one that has high value for us, the one that cares for us, the one that wants to see good gifts for us, the one that wants us to commune with Him, to talk with Him, to seek Him, and to serve Him. If one will do that, the future can be much brighter than the opposite of living for this world, living to please the things and the cultures of this world, rather than to please man, but we ought to desire to please God. And we ought to desire to find out the value that we have in God's plan, and to desire to live out what He has for us. So in our upcoming lesson, we'll see how we can get there. How do we live that? How do we live that life out? We will explore the passions that we must have so that we will one day be like Joshua. We have the thought here that we want to avoid being old, being like that surfer dude, just kind of wasting our time, right? Now, although it might be fun to surf, and there ain't nothing wrong with surfing, of course, but if that's your God and it's over and above, how many times did he miss surfing for maybe visiting, going to church? Who knows? But we know that anything that we put above serving God becomes our God. We want to be able to. We ought to desire to live a life that's pleasing to the God that created us. All right. So that brings us to our study questions. So, we've got a few weeks to look at our study questions, so I'm sure you guys all have a paragraph or two for each question, right? So, who do I call in for the first question? I don't know. I don't know how to do that. All right, here we go. So let's look at question number 1. Chris, would you be so kind as to read question number 1 for us, please?
Take a few moments and write down the most critical lessons God has taught you through the study so far.
All right, so as your thought, as Brother Chris just read, to take a few moments and write down what you picked up. Now, what I picked up and what you picked up, and each one of us could have picked up something different. There's really not a right or a wrong answer here as far as I'm concerned. sometimes I know when I'm sitting out in that direction, I like don't say a whole lot because I'm afraid to give a wrong answer, or someone might think it's kind of goofy what I wrote down, but, anybody who wants to tackle that question? Who wants to read the one paragraph answer that they wrote down? Or they could wing it, we won't know because we're not looking at your book. But, what is something that you might have, gathered through this study? All right, Allie, what do you have? Oh, wait. Well, I'll lead the way and then anybody else can follow. How's that sound? So we think about couple of things that I got from it, and it's been a lifelong battle, is how this world could just sidetrack you, you know? You think about culture, you think about the things in this world, you think about how it can draw you in, it can just, it's like a vacuum, it can just suck you in, it can sidetrack you, and take your mind off of what's really, truly important. And when you think about what's really and truly important, you think about, well, you can think about how important life is right now, and thinking about how it is living for the Lord and being that example, but thinking about brought me into more of a insight on eternity. I'm not just living for right now. I ought not be living for just right now. But what I do now, it does take me towards eternity, and it will be, it's not just for the moment, but it's for eternity. So, all right, anybody else?
I think one thing I've taken away from it is, like, the first couple lessons of this study was kind of maturing and maturity, taking responsibility for stuff. And I think that one thing I've taken away, and I think contentment is a big part of maturity. And I think somebody that's mature, they're usually pretty content. And entitlement usually is immature. An individual that is immature usually feels entitled, and I think that's something that I've taken away. Kind of, I can sometimes feel like I deserve more, or I should have more, and that's entitlement because I have way more than I deserve, and I've been blessed. And so contentment, I think, along with maturity, and kind of just being content with what I have, being mature, and taking responsibility for mistakes I made.
And you can take it as God's plan for you, and and you can reflect on, am I seeking God's plan? And I know I've shared with you guys many times that I can't tell you the actual text verse, but that has been one of my verses that I've always got going in the spinning in the playlist in my mind is contentment with godliness is great gain. I mean, that's just, I've been so blessed myself. I mean, if I've been content, and sometimes it's human nature to want different things. And, I can't say I've never wanted anything, but I have tried and strived to be content with what the Lord has given me. And He has blessed me immensely. And I have way more than I also deserve. And then we talk about being a steward. We talked about being a steward in a few of our lessons previous. And we are to be good stewards with what we have, So if you are content with what you have and a good steward with it, the Lord will bless immensely. All right? Other hands, I saw some other hands going up. Sister Jen?
I was trying to remember. It's kind of hard to remember what I was thinking at the time, but look, here's some of my notes. I have a note that says, encouraging those that would come behind.
Mm-hmm.
So when we make those positive choices, it helps the next generation to see your example.
And how can that actually work in your life? Think about you want to be an encouragement. How do I look when trial comes up? Am I talking? Am I moaning and groaning? Or am I, having a confidence that God will provide? And that's all things we ought to be aware of. And we think about being mature and what do the younger generation see in us? Again, we know Joshua at one time he had to follow before he could lead. But on the tail end here we see how Joshua he is that encourager. He is the one that's trying to live and strive and encourage the next generation to live and to serve God and to love God. So yes, good point. All right, anybody else? Anything else? Pastor Graver?
What I like about what Joshua says about be of good courage and be strong is that's what the Lord had told him.
Right.
And he lived that, demonstrated that. Now he's like Paul to the end of his race. And he's passing on to the next generation what God has passed on to him. And my mind goes back to that training class for teachers that we did with, I can't think of his name right now, but he encouraged people, he encouraged teachers not to teach stuff, but to teach them how to learn. Because if I can teach them how to learn, they can surpass me.
Right.
And Joshua is kind of doing that. He's teaching them what they need, and maybe the Lord will use them in even greater ways than he used Joshua. And us as we pass it on to the next generation.
Now, sometimes, I guess, in this world, in this culture, think about what Pastor Graver just said, you know. Sometimes, do you really want somebody to be better than you? Huh? You know, do you want to be the best at your game and maybe just tell them enough just to get them to kind of to get by? Or do you want to teach them more than what you have? And that's a good point, you know. We ought to desire to share and to be that encouragement, and that they can be a bigger and better blessing than we've been. So, good point.
Right, and I hadn't thought of that, about that competition that I remember at work. There was always a competition between sugar and grain. And my boss's boss, I came out really good in one of the surveys that was done. And he said, now you hope the other side gets is just as good. And I said, no. And the boss's boss said, but that only benefits you. It doesn't benefit the hotel.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a very good point. And again, like I say, you have to follow before you lead, and God was directing Joshua to be strong and be courageous, and again, he got it, you know, and he was the one now giving that encouragement. So, all right, question number 2. Daryl, do you have your book? You want to read question number 2 for us?
Yeah, list the 4 things that hold young adults back from following God with passion.
All right, so we have 4 things that we covered in our study about 4 things that hold young adults back. And they can hold adults back too, actually. So it's not only young adults, but all this stuff applies to adults too. But what were those things? Anybody remember? Got them written down? It was open book, you know. You can kind of go back in a few pages and you can probably gather them all up. But what do we got?
Of course, the distraction of the world.
Well, be the distraction of the world. We could call that folly or rebellion, right? To think about the distractions of this world. But so we have.
Friends or relatives can do that too.
Say what?
Friends or relatives can do that too.
Friends or relatives can hold you back from following God without a doubt. So, but we had 4 topics. One was, yeah.
Was it distractions, selfishness, fear, and bitterness?
No, it's close. I did say there was no such thing as a wrong answer, but that's not what we're looking for. It's not wrong, those will hold you back, but that's not what I'm looking for. We're looking for, one was immaturity. One was immaturity. All right? You think about young adults and what that holds young adults back from following God with passion. Immaturity. Now, another one, if you don't know, sometimes if you just don't know, it was what ignorant. There you go. So, immaturity, ignorance. And the other 2 I just kind of slipped out of my mouth and I kind of gave them. But if you don't want to follow the rules, you want to blaze your own trail, you want to be, what? Rebellious, yes. And you just probably don't care, you're foolish, or we call it, what else? Folly? Rhymes with Molly. There you go, folly. So there you go. So those are the 4 things that I was looking for. The other ones that you all mentioned, families and friends, and yeah, those are all can hold you back. But the ones we were looking for our answer was immaturity, ignorance, rebellion, and folly. They'll hold anybody back. All right. So we have here, okay, another open book here. Here we go. List the 3 great rewards in store for those who embrace adulthood with biblical passions. That's what we were talking about in one of the lessons in one of the studies. And what are the 3 rewards we talked about?
Life of eternal significance.
A life of eternal significance, yes. Okay. And then we think about a God who cares for us. And what do we had for the second one?
Timeless gifts of a good life.
Yes, timeless gifts of a good life. And then what's the third one?
Eternal rewards of a faithful steward.
Yeah, we talked about being a steward, and we talked about the eternal rewards of being a faithful steward. All right. Question 4. Let me see. Seth, you want to read that for us?
Describe in a paragraph form what you would like to say about your life once you reach the end of your journey.
All right, Carly, that brings us to you. Any thoughts on what you would want someone to say about you at the end of your life's journey? You're young. It's a good thing to think about. All right, so coming from, you think it's not a hard answer. You want to be known as a foolish, know-it-all that's prideful and has all the answers to life. That's how you want to. That's how you want to be known at your. That's how you want people to talk about you at your funeral, right? No, that's probably not what we want. What are some thoughts that you might have and some considerations? What were some things that you'd like to have people think? What were some of the impacts in people's lives you'd like to have? Again, there's no right or wrong answer unless, of course, it doesn't line up with God's word. But any thoughts? Yes,
I
Chris.
just wish that you had followed the Lord more closely throughout your life earlier, rather than holding it back and waiting till later to do things. To live for
And that's something as your outlook changes, as the prism of where you see life changes. I'm getting a little older than what I used to be, and I turn around and I hear things that I heard people say. And like for example, your kids grow up fast, and Seth Rowe, you young folks with young families, enjoy the time. But as you grow up, you've heard, I wish I wouldn't have done this, wish I would have done that, wish I would walk closer to the Lord. You think about when the time comes, and when you think about what you'd like to have people say about you when you reach your journey, is that you trusted in the Lord, you had faith in Him, you looked to Him for your refuge and everything, and that you walked with a confidence in a sovereign God. Any other thoughts? Anybody else? Now, if you have that thought in mind, what's going to happen? I mean, they're going to talk about probably you and raising your family and how you were, just the impact that you maybe had on them. But we ought to certainly desire to walk in a way that shows us having a confidence in a sovereign God that created us, and faith and trust in Him. All right, let me see. Allie, can you help with the decipher? Can you decipher that for me? I'm not sure what that answer was there, Matthew, but no. All right. Was she saying she wanted to read question number 5? Yeah. We're going to go over to Jared. Can you read question 5 for us, please?
List the right decisions that Joshua made that led him to a life without regrets.
All right, a list of right decisions that Joshua made to lead him to a life without regrets. All right, what do we got? What are some thoughts?
He was obedient to the Lord.
You mean like walking around a city, and just, not having any kind of heavy artillery or tanks or anything, but just marching around a building and listening to the Lord and having the walls collapse? Yeah, that's a good example. What are some other things? Yeah, ultimately, and I think I kind of picked out too for him having a confidence in the Lord. You know, like when they said, you know, we can't take it, but he was one of the two that said, hey, we got this. You know, God, you know, he was eager and he trusted in the Lord, like you said, and he was willing to go. Others didn't, but he was willing to go and trust in the Lord and listen to him.
He trusted in the Lord when no one else thought he should. He didn't cave to the peer pressure of other people thought. He knew what the Lord's will was for him, and he stuck to it, regardless of what others thought.
And that would be a good thing to apply to our lives today is God's people, to not succumb to the cultures of the world and the worry what someone else might think. We got
Even, I mean, if you think, the Israelites all feared God and they believed in God, so it's kind of like if one of us stood up and said, this is what the Lord's saying, everyone else said, no way. And in your church, you stood alone, but did what the Lord, so your brothers and sisters in Christ that have like faith are too scared and don't want to do it. You have to stand up to them and say, I don't care, this is what the Lord's telling me to do.
Right.
I think it would be especially hard. To do it with people of the world might be like, well, they don't know any better anyway. They don't know the Lord like I do. So of course it seems foolish to them, but to do it with people that have like faith, it seems like it's more difficult.
One thing I know, kind of Barb and I, we were talking about a little bit, and one thing that we have come to try to have a peace with, or have more of a, how do you want to say it? We have to do what we feel the Lord is leading us to do. What other people do doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not, I don't have to give an answer to it, and we really tried, like, okay, so-and-so does it. No, well, doesn't matter. We try to put all that aside and try to live more of a, what do I feel burdened that God would have me to do? So, for sure. Any other thoughts? All right. Jared had his hand up. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Got a smile out of you anyway, man. I like it. All right, let me see here. We have question number 6 is a personal question. But we can go ahead and read it. Shelley, you want to read that for us?
What things in your life threaten to take the place of God?
All right, what is it, Shelley? I'm just kidding. You don't have to. I think we can all. Someone. You want to answer that? Go ahead.
The thing that comes to my mind is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Yeah.
except for true worship.
Yeah.
Like religion can, church can, like, we think that we're doing right, but is it just we're going through the motions?
Yeah.
Has it become an idol?
Well, and it goes back to
But
the
anything can.
first question. Like, this world can just suck you in. So there's so much that if you let your guard down, don't stay focused on serving the Lord. You just think okay, I think of myself as being a husband, okay? So I have a family. I have a responsibility to my family, so I'm working. And I've never been able to sort that out. I'm a worker, and that's kind of to my demise. But you need to provide for your family. But it's how do you balance all that? And I have, to this day, not figured that out just yet. And I'm not proficient at it, let's put it that way. We need to be careful. And it can be anything. So what things in your life threaten to take the place of God? So we need to be in tune to that. We need to be aware of that in our lives, or ask ourselves, am I doing this too much to where it's being taken the place of God? So, all right. Question number 7. Sister Jen, you got your book with you there? You want to read that, please, or?
It says, write out Joshua 23:8 and 23:11.
All right, so we got here Joshua 23:8, 23 through 11. And it has here, I wrote it out, and I went through my Strong's Concordance, and I wrote down a bunch of stuff here. So we'll take a second. Does anybody else want to read it? And someone else can read it. Go ahead. I don't know, Pastor Graver, you want to go ahead and I'll ask some questions.
23:8, but cleave unto the Lord your God as ye have done unto this day. Verse 11, take good heed therefore unto yourselves that ye love the Lord your God.
What does that mean? Anybody know what that means? Anybody maybe look up the Strong's Concordance and see what some of these words have thought of? Well, what I got out of it, I took some time and I read it and I was writing it out. But cleave, what is it to cleave? Now, if you're a meat cutter, and I used to cut meat with my dad, we had a cleaver, and that's not what it's talking about. Chop, you know, I know those chop things.
It's almost the opposite.
It's almost the opposite. It's
Yeah.
not, you're not supposed to chop or sever with it, you're supposed to what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to cleave optical fibers, you know,
Yeah.
in my job. It was cut. But, yeah, I think cleave in this sense is cling to.
Cling to, yeah, it says to very much, it says to cling, that's the very first thing that comes up in the Strong's. To cling, it says, but cling, hold fast unto the Lord, your God. Be joined together, as in the thought to cling, to hold fast to be joined together unto the Lord your God, as ye have done unto this day. So Joshua, he's encouraging them to cling to him, to stay with him as they have been serving. It has here, take good heed. What is it to take good heed? Well, to take good heed is to delight. And to delight and to heed is to what? To hedge. It has here the thought to protect, to observe, to preserve. It has another one here, but I can't read it, I'm sorry. I can't read it. I wrote it too small. Even with my glasses, I can't read it. I'm gonna have to look it up in a second here. But it has here to take good heed. Not only take heed, but take diligent heed. To take diligent heed. To take, to protect, to observe, to preserve. Therefore unto yourselves that ye love the Lord your God. And how we love the Lord our God? Anybody know?
Heart, soul, and mind.
Aha, Deuteronomy what? I gotta read down here, so I gotta find it. Give me a second, I'll find it. Deuteronomy, I got it written down here someplace. Deuteronomy 6:5. And as God's people, we ought to love him how? We'll go ahead and read Deuteronomy chapter 6:5. Who's got that? We're back up front, Mr. B. I don't know if you got that.
And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might.
All right. And if we do that, we ought to find ourselves not succumbing to the cultures and the cares of this world, but focusing on him. All right. Well, that's good. Next week, we are going to start our next lesson, which is lesson 8. And the title is Passion for God, part 1. There's going to be a couple parts to it. But part 1, Embracing Personal Intimacy with God. I see a few words we might want to look up for next week, possibly, huh? So anyway, next week we'll start this.
Did you read number 8?
Oh, is there another one? There's one on the next page. Thank you, Daryl. I forgot. No, I didn't. Has here the thought, and we didn't. Hey, maybe I could challenge you out. Maybe we should know the memory verse for next week before we get started for this week. It's a longer memory verse, but it's one we should all be very familiar with. So it should be almost really committed to memory already. But you want to go ahead and read that for us? I don't know, Daryl. You want to read question 8 since I missed it?
It says, write a prayer to God, expressing your heart to give, or write a prayer to God, expressing your heart to Him and pressing forward in life.
All right, so there we go. We have a thought that in a prayer time, express your heart to Him and give us the ability to have that strength and trust in Him, moving forward in His plan in our lives. So again, we'll go ahead and I'll challenge you guys, and I'll include myself obviously, but we'll come in and hopefully have the memory verse for Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2. And again, it's one we're familiar with. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Romans 12, 1 and 2. So, all right, with that, we'll ask Brother Chris, would you please close us and dismiss us in prayer?
Dear Lord, we're so thankful for being able to be here today, for your word, and the time we have to study it.